Bring the meeting to order. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We have Boy Scout Troop 5214 to help lead us. Please come up forward, if you would. Flag's over here. So if you look at the flag here, this is where we'll do it. Okay, guys, ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Troop. Good job. Roll call, please.
Garrick.
Here.
Grinberg.
Here.
Petcorn.
Here.
Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. Ben Hushka is sitting in the back there. Ben, would you stand up just for a minute so people know who you are? Thank you. Ben Hushka is a city assessor who will retire at the end of the month. With his expertise and dedication, Ben has continued to make improvements to the city's property appraisal process by advancing the appropriate use of technology and by attracting and coaching a high-quality team to support this important function. His calm and caring demeanor has served him well when tackling difficult issues. Ben is looked upon as a subject matter expert in the state and region and has always approached the work in a fair and equitable manner. We wish you the best in the next chapter of your life, Ben, and know you will find joy in the many new adventures and time with family. Rarely do you get ruffled when we have those tough questions. The library has partnered with Fargo Public Schools to provide Fargo Public Library books to the Fargo Public Schools students via Sora Overdrive's app for schools. In addition to the school's Overdrive ebook collection, students are able to see and check out age-appropriate material from the Fargo Public Library in Sora using their student ID card. The library's all-ages summer reading program, Imagine Your Story, continues through August 15th and provides opportunities for reading and prizes. Upcoming events including virtual magic show and virtual magic class by magician Jeff Quinn, and both events are available for all ages to screen through August 15th. The Fargo History Hunt continues through August 15th, and this year the program features 17 historic monuments, markers, statues, and structures throughout Fargo. I'd like to congratulate John Strand and Arlette Preston on their City Commission victories. I greatly look forward to working with them as we collaborate to advance the interests of Fargo residents. I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation for Commissioner Tony Grinberg for his 4 years of service to the City of Fargo, his work with the FM Diversion Authority and its Finance Committee, serving as a liaison to the Department of Planning and Development, his passion for special assessments reform, and being a proponent for downtown development. Tony, I want to wish you well in your future endeavors. I know you'll still be around helping us out.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June 1, 2020 regular meeting and the June 4th, 2020 special meeting?
So moved again.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 35?
So moved again.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Garrick.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Desi, COVID-19 update. Those numbers keep dropping. The population's doing a good job. Aren't you excited?
I'm super excited, and I'm first on the agenda, which never happens. So thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. So yeah, our numbers have been fairly static. We're at 2,058 in Cass County. Of those, 1,794 have recovered. We've had 62 deaths in Cass County, but both our death numbers and our hospitalization numbers are slowly declining as well. We've adjusted our contact tracing efforts as the numbers decrease, so does our need for contact tracers. So we're cycling some of our staff out of those roles, and we can pull them back in if needed. Our environmental health group is working to develop plan with, to work with businesses if they have any education needs, if they have positive cases, if they have questions on how to clean environments, different things like that. So we will be pulling in some groups around the community to get a working group together for that. We'll also be transitioning to take over all the logistics for the static testing sites from our agency as well. We continue to work with our targeted testing matrix that the task force developed. Last week we did roughly 900 to 1,300 tests per day. And just a reminder, when those numbers get reported at the state level, they're reporting it by unique individuals. So we've had lots of questions on our data as far as, you know, it would look as though we're only doing, 200 to 400 tests a day some days. Well, there's serial testing going on. So once a person has tested, they aren't counted in that daily testing number again, just so you guys know that. We continue to work on a county dashboard that will have Cass County specific data, and the state is supposed to have a test site available for us to look at early this week, hopefully, so then we can kind of personalize it for our task force. There was some changes in CDC guidance as far as for testing of close contacts. Before it was only symptomatic close contacts. Now they want any close contact, asymptomatic or symptomatic, to be tested from a positive case. So that is a change, and that would be 7 to 10 days after an exposure. We were requested this past week to do a mass testing event. Many of you know, at the Fargo Dome. That was a state request. We were tested roughly 1,800 people. Our positivity rate was right around that 2%, which we kind of assumed it would be. That's been pretty standard with the other mass testing events that we've done. We committed to doing the next 2 weeks, so this week, Thursday and Friday, next week, Thursday and Friday, to mass testing, and then we will resume our testing matrix is ongoing, but we will strictly go to that afterwards and adjust as needed to any new testing priority groups that we established on the task force. So, any questions for me?
Any questions of commissioners? Thank you, Des.
Okay,
Appreciate it. It's not quite 5:15, but I think we can go through the items. One was withdrawn and one is continued, so we won't have a public hearing today. So we'll do 37A is withdrawn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Strand.
Yes.
Gary.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. And then item 37E is continued to 6/29/20. It's an application for the Elliott Place. Do I have a motion to continue this?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Is Jill back in, or no, she didn't? She stepped out for a minute? I suppose we have to wait till we get to item 37B. I could start that. Joe was supposed to start that, I guess. So we can talk about selection of the police chief. So as we go through this, what we've been doing is trying to figure out how to select a new police chief. So sitting down with staff, we came up with some recommendations to the commissioners. Last time we picked a police chief, it had a little different format. Commissioner Pepcorn and myself worked with a committee. On that committee, we had two public officials, or two public people from the public. The way we've modified this at this time is we're going to have 4 people from the public, and we've asked them to apply if there's a reason they want to become on the selection of the police chief. It might be from prior experience or what reasons you have to do that, what you think you can contribute to the committee. We also added on that we'll take one member selected from the Human Relations Committee, and we'll take one member from the Native American Commission. So we think we're going to get a more different segment of the population as well. You then will also have Commissioner Pickhorn and myself will sit on that committee, and then we will have the size of the committee is about 13, 14. We think is pretty big. The idea behind that is to try to have a selection committee that's more representative of the community, and hopefully will ask the questions. The final selection, of course, comes back to the commission, and the commissioners will make the final say on who we select as our police chief. What we've talked about is leadership qualities we're looking for, enhancing the community, working with the community, and different challenges of policy reflection and other things going on in our society right now. Jill, do you want to just speak up to the selection of the police chief? And just for the commissioners or the public, would you just go over the committee members? I don't have them all in my head right now.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. So the memo included in your packet on page 1 outlines kind of our traditional formation of the selection committee, excuse me, including the mayor, deputy mayor, city administration, and then typically we have representation from our Civil Service Commission, excuse me, as well as other public organizations in the community. Historically, we've included at least a couple of members of the police department, and the mayor's recommendation for this selection, excuse me, is also to include members of 2 of the City of Fargo commissions, including the Human Relations Commission, as well as the Native American Commission. In addition to that, we've discussed including at least 4 community members as well to get the best representation of the community as possible in this important selection. And so page 2 of the memo in your packet really outlines what that selection of community members, what that process would look like. If approved tonight, we would open up the process to community members to submit a statement of interest in serving on the selection committee, and really asking 3 specific questions, including why they're interested in serving on the selection committee, how they believe they can contribute to the successful screening and placement of a new police chief, and then listing any experience that they have, whether it's professional or volunteer, in this type of selection. So again, the goal is try to form as inclusive of a committee as possible that will bring a really good diverse aspect to selecting our next police chief. We've also included in the packet just a tentative schedule. So if this process is approved tonight for the selection committee, we would open up for statements of interest as early as tomorrow and collect those statements of interest over the next week. If we receive a really large volume of response to that request, then we may need a couple of weeks to review to determine which community members would be selected to serve on that committee. So that's why in the tentative schedule you see kind of 2 outlines of a tentative time frame for the overall selection process. Then once the committee is fully formed, at the earliest we would bring the community member list back to you at the next commission meeting. Again, if we receive a really large response, we would bring that list back then in 2 weeks following.
So far we've had 26 applicants, just for the commissioners to know, from all over the country. This is a position that was going to attract a lot of interest. The city of Fargo is a great city to be police chief of. Any questions of commissioners? Commissioner Grinberg.
Just a question, maybe from past experience, do you envision the selection committee making a recommendation or a list of finalists?
So typically, we have the selection committee make a recommendation that's then brought forward to the city commission. And that's through the assessment process. Again, historically, we've had the candidates spend some time with members of the Fargo Police Department, typically during kind of a reception or open forum with the police department, and have asked for their impressions. And then at least a full day to 2 days with the selection committee as well during the actual assessment itself. And throughout that process, we then normally form a recommendation by the selection committee to the city commission.
And the commissioners are welcome to any of those. It's a public process, so the commissioners can do that, and they can meet the candidates as well. So we always welcome input.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair? So Jill,
Burn.
it says on here that there's the top 8 candidates. Is that for it's on the August 4th on timeline B? Is that 8 candidates for,
Police chief.
and is that a set number, or how will that go?
No, we indicated approximate on the tentative schedule. Really, until that selection committee is formed, or I should say, once that selection committee is formed and they have an opportunity to review all 26 applicants, then we typically look at their rating system to determine who is in that top group of candidates. And so with the tentative schedule we'd laid out, we'd like to do at least a virtual interview with a top group of candidates, potentially up to 8, but that will all be determined by the rating that occurs with the selection committee.
Mr. Gary.
You kind of touched on this, but how do the rank and file officers get to have their input? You said they could meet the individual and then give their impressions. How would they give their impressions?
Yes, so the last process, we had a much more informal approach to providing those impressions. We have since created some what we call impression tools for that type of setting that we would like to have members of the department who choose to participate in that open forum to complete. And it's based on criteria that we're looking for in our next police chief, and so they would have an opportunity to provide those impressions, and those impressions give us an opportunity to try to quantify their overall impressions of the candidates. And then in addition, we would have 2 members of the police department, 2 sworn members, participate in the selection committee as well. Of course, theirs is an important voice in that selection.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure who to ask this to. I'll start with you, Jill. How do we know that our applicant pool is satisfactorily diverse?
Because we are unable to ask for information such as gender or ethnicity or race on a job application, we do not have that information for our 26 candidates.
So let's suppose that we elevate that as a priority in this process as it unfolds. Is there a moment in time where we can assess that it is satisfactorily diverse or isn't, and address it accordingly?
It would really only be during the phases of the selection process if those members choose to voluntarily disclose that information. You know, again, in the job application process itself, we are not able to ask for that information. And so our decisions are not based on that information.
You have to look at the candidates, John, and we'll see what comes out. Now, if we find the pool isn't big enough or we don't have enough diversity, that can be challenged at that time. But it's still, you have to interview the people and be fair. I know what you had said on the radio, but you still have to look at your candidates, so.
It makes sense, Mayor, but you know, I recall being in a school district where year after year after year, we'd be told, well, we just don't have a diverse applicant pool. So then we modified our policies to make that a requirement, to diversify the applicant pool in this community. So that, and I know we don't know yet, but we also know that it's a value of our community going forward, especially now that we don't misstep and not have diversity or not have opportunities, you know, that would reflect the world we're in today.
Do you have a motion?
I'll move the recommended motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Strand?
Thank you. Mayor, do you have an intention, or is there going to be an interim chief named until we have a new chief appointed?
Chief Todd isn't retired, or hasn't placed retirement to end of July. The timetable should place this person in by end of July, hopefully. It will be delayed if we can't find a suitable chief, so. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Mahoney,
Aye. Now we'll go to public hearings. Text amendment to amendment section 20-0402 and repeal section 20-0403 in the Fargo Municipal Code, Land Development Code relating to prohibition of firearm and ammunition sales in a non-farm commercial use or as a home occupation. Denial recommended by Planning Commission 5520. We got a team here to explain this, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick intro, hand it over to Aaron, and then I'll be back for any Q&A if needed. And so, first of all, I just wanted to thank Aaron and our city attorney's team for, kind of doing a in-depth legal analysis of this. And so our recommendation that you'll see in front of you tonight is really based on that legal review. At some point, though, the discussion, as a reminder, as I mentioned to Mayor, becomes a community's values discussion, and so that discussion is beyond the Planning Commission, the Planning Department per se. So I just wanted to add that kind of 2 cents. Aaron's going to go through the technical review, and then we'll help conclude.
Thank you. So here tonight, I just have a really brief overview of kind of everything that's outlined in the staff report. It's a pretty dense staff report as far as planning department staff reports go. So I'm more than happy to circle back to anything that you guys would like to dive into in more depth. Additionally, I wanted to point out too that we should have Joanne Symington, a local ATF representative, on the phone as well, should there be any questions for the ATF. So to start with, a little bit of background for everybody's benefit here. At the January 27th, 2020 City Commission meeting, the City Commission directed staff to review the current prohibition of firearm and ammunition sales as part of a home occupation. Additionally, City Commission directed staff to initiate an LDC text amendment to revise or eliminate the prohibition of firearm and ammunition sales as a home occupation. Along those, or at the same time, I should say, the city staff had been in contact with a local citizen, Peter McDonald, who was also interested in pursuing a text amendment to remove this prohibition from the current land development code. He did subsequently submit that application. And so the application in front of you here tonight is both a city-initiated text amendment as well as a citizen-initiated text amendment. Additionally, one thing I wanted to point out quick is that there are actually 2 different instances of a prohibition of firearm and ammunition sales within the Land Development Code. The first one, as you know, is related to home occupations, and then the other one is actually related to non-farm commercial uses within the agricultural zoning district, which I'll touch on in a second here. And mainly, I just wanted to point out that the text amendment, as drafted in the staff report, does reflect both of those sections of the code. In terms of the history of the existing ordinance, kind of the 3 things I'd point out here is just that the current land development code was adopted in 1998. It was a replacement of the previous zoning code prior to that, and so because it was such a large-scale change in zoning, there was a number of text amendments that took place over the intervening years as various issues came up and the code was kind of ironed out, if you will. There was one such text amendment in 2001 related to home occupations. This was mainly focused on the number of customers that could come to the site of a home occupation, but included in that text amendment was the addition of firearm and ammunition sales to the list of prohibited uses as a home occupation. So 2001 is when the language prohibiting that type of use was added to the Land Development Code. Likewise, in 2007, there was an additional amendment to the Land Development Code, again related to that non-farm commercial activity in the agricultural zoning district. This was mainly related to allowing limited commercial activities in the extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction of Fargo, but that ordinance did also include a list of prohibited uses one of which being firearms and ammunition sales. So in both cases, when staff reviewed the meeting materials as well as the minutes, there was really no in-depth discussion relating specifically to firearms and ammunition sales. It was mainly related to kind of the other intents of the ordinance. In terms of the staff analysis section of the staff report, a couple of things I wanted to touch on, or at least highlight, is number one, I know there was a number of legal concerns that were brought up when this was initially discussed. And so staff would just point out that from a staff's perspective, there is no concern if this ordinance were to remain as is, if it were to be removed, or if it were to be amended in any manner that you see fit. Additionally, the sales of firearms is regulated by the ATF, which requires a federal firearms license, which again is administered by the ATF in accordance with federal regulation. The staff report does include comments from the Fargo Police and Fire Department, as well as the ATF. And then as it relates to the home occupations, staff would also point out that the home occupations do comprise or do have a number of performance standards that would still apply if this amendment were to be approved. And so, for example, that includes things like there's current restriction on hazardous substances associated with home occupations, and so that would preclude the manufacturing of ammunition as part of a home occupation. Additionally, there's a maximum number of customers per day at a home occupation, 12 customers per day, 12 per week. That would still apply if this ordinance were to be approved as outlined in the staff report. And then lastly, the staff did receive a number of comments related to this application, both for and against. Those comments are summarized in the staff report. In addition to the comments received at the Planning Commission meeting, there was an additional written comment that is included in your staff report as an attachment. So, excuse me. Lastly, staff would just note that the Planning Commission did vote 5-3 to recommend denial of the requested amendment. But staff would point out that the review criteria and recommendation is outlined for approval if the City Commission so chooses. We kind of see this as keeping in line with City Commission's original direction to staff to formulate an amendment for consideration. But staff certainly does recognize that there are a number of opinions and considerations as part of this, and so we would just point out that staff is available to, for additional review on any of the issues or concerns that might be out there. And so with that, I do have the recommended motion from the staff report up on the screen, and again, I'd be happy to circle back to any items you'd like to talk through in more detail. Thank you.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this amendment recommendation?
Got to raise it up here a little bit. Thank you for letting me speak in front of you tonight. I'm going to read this so I don't digress, and I promised the mayor I would cut it as short as I possibly could.
For the public, just give your name, please.
My name is Edward Christosik. I'm sure pretty much everybody here already knows who I am. So I'm here to discuss Fargo Neighborhood Coalition's proposition. They've been the most adamantly against this, and I'm here to rebut their proposition statement or their proposal statement. FNC's, or the Fargo Neighborhood Coalition's entire statement is pretty inaccurate for the most part. I'm willing to accept it was either by a lack of knowledge or by design. I'm willing to accept either one of those reasons. But to quote Socrates, the only true wisdom is knowing when you know nothing. This position statement is not wisdom, but it is in fact produced under the belief that the authors think that they know what they're talking about. The FNC has provided 15 bullet points as to why they believe the Fargo Land Development Code should not be changed. In the interest of time, I'm not going to touch all 15, but would like to talk about 4. These 4 are the shining examples of the 15 that are horribly inaccurate. The second and 9th bullet point they are talking about is essentially touching on the same point, which is the concern of the safety of a neighborhood with an FFL dealer being present. This is due to the fact that North Dakota does not require any additional licensing or permitting to own a firearm, and that is 100% true. North Dakota does not require any additional permitting to purchase a firearm. But what the FNC does not know, and is conveniently left out, is that every customer who walks into an FFL dealer must fill out a Form 4473 and is subjected to a background check by the FBI through the NICS, or the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Failure to pass that means they do not leave without a firearm. So it renders the concept of having additional licensing kind of a moot point, because if the FBI is doing a background check on them, what's the need? The 8th bullet point concerns themselves with the types of FFL dealers, specifically Type 2 and Type 9. Now you got to understand there's 11 types of FFLs out there, but FNC decided that they were going to pick on Type 2 and Type 9, so that's what I'm going to talk about. Type 2 is a pawnbroker. The city of Fargo requires a pawnbroker license. It's a $250 yearly fee to do so. You have to post a $5,000 bond to do it. There's a $250 initiation fee, and there's also an inspection fee. With the 12 people per week, it is not financially feasible to have a pawn shop open in your home, and I will personally provide an 18-year-old bottle of scotch to any one of you that can prove to me that the city commission would give a license to somebody who wants to open a home-based pawnbroker shop. Second one is a Type 9. The concept of a Type 9 dealer opening a home-based business is quite honestly laughable. Type 9 dealers deal in things like grenades, bombs, missiles, poison gas, the weapons that are required to shoot those things, explosives, incendiary devices. There are quite literally 0 Type 9 dealers in the state of North Dakota, and that's because the ATF does not give them out. You have to have a reason. You have to have contracts with government agencies. You're not going to get a Type 9 dealership. So the concept of it being a home business is out of the realm of ridiculous. I've saved the best for last. The 14th bullet point states, and this is the FNC providing this information, nationally between 2008 and 2018, there's been a 400% increase in the number of FFL applications. I'm going to say it again. Between 2008 and 2018, there's been a 400% increase in FFL applications. This is what the FNC is telling us, and they provide a reference. Completely inaccurate. And the reference that the FNC provides proves it. There was a 400% increase, but those were in NFA forms. NFA forms have nothing to do with FFL dealerships. NFA forms are forms submitted by individuals who want to purchase or manufacture a suppressor. A short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotgun has literally nothing to do with FFL applications. This just goes to show that the FNC does not understand the subject at hand, and that doing a rudimentary Google search does not make them an expert. I grew up around firearms. I've spent almost half my life in the military training and working with firearms. I am a licensed FFL dealer. I am a permit to carry holder. I spent a large portion of my time educating myself on the subject of firearms and the laws surrounding them. In light of this, I would consider myself to be something of a subject matter expert. I don't know everything, but I do know a lot. In this day and age, with the internet and smartphones, we all have unlimited access to infinite information, and it's commonly human nature to learn a little bit about as many subjects as possible. This leads people to being confident in what they know and the belief that they are subject matter experts, when in fact they really are not. Charles Darwin once said, ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge, and in this case it turns out to be correct. The position statement provided by the FNC is truly not worth the paper it's printed on, and it is my belief that it only supports an anti-Second Amendment agenda, and that the Fargo Land Development Code prohibiting firearms and sales as a home-based occupation should be repealed by the commission tonight. Thank you for your time, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions? Commission? Is there anybody else who wishes to speak?
Hi, my name is Peter McDonald. Again, same thing. I just kind of wrote my note too, so I stay on topic here. Far be it for me to stand here and try to change anyone's feelings. on firearms, but I would like to present you with a few facts and a few of my own feelings. In June 2018, there were an estimated 393 million firearms in U.S. residents' hands. To put that in perspective for you, that's 12 and a half guns for every 10 citizens. So to be afraid of guns, I mean, there's already a lot out there. Not that bad. And in March of 2020, 1.9 million gun transfers were recorded. There's no argument that in the wrong hands, anything is dangerous. For homicide deaths due to firearms, you lose 33 people per million. That was 2018 fact. And there has been guns used for self-defense, protecting yourself, 1.25 million times, which is 10 times the rate of guns being used as homicide. And if you want to, compare it to something else, you're more likely to die from smoking, which is 32 times more likely to happen than to be killed by a firearm. I kind of find it shocking. I can't go a day without hearing something about guns on the news, but you can go weeks, months without hearing anything about smoking in the news. And our local news kind of, highlights how the news cycle wants to, show you something sensational so you keep watching. The Forum on May 31st, 2020, wrote an opinion against firearms sales that highlights the true nature of the information we are presented through our local media outlets. As hypocrisy goes, they argue that firearms should not be sold out of residential addresses, while at the same time taking money for classified ads and promoting gun sales out of residential addresses. Guns shouldn't be taboo in today's society, and placing unnecessary rules and restrictions on them only keeps them out of law-abiding citizens' hands. Currently, there are over 300 relevant federal and state laws regarding the manufacture, the design, the sale, the purchase, and/or the possession of guns. I fail to see what this zoning law is protecting. Zoning ordinances are created to promote the health, safety, morals, public convenience, general prosperity, and public welfare. You should represent all residents in this community, but it has become clear on this matter that some of you only care about what people in single-family homes, or what happens to people in single-family homes, and more so, personally, what you or you do not want to see in your neighborhood. You allow guns to be sold across the street from low-income, high-occupancy residential buildings, while allowing that same business selling firearms to operate a daycare. If it's good enough for them, why isn't it good enough for you? Commissioners, you all swore that you would support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of North Dakota upon taking your positions here. The last time we left here, you made it clear that you did not want this to become a Second Amendment issue. After research done by your team, it should be clear that this is nothing but a Second Amendment issue. And just another law prescribed to erode the Second Amendment rights of people to keep and bear arms. Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to this topic? Greg, can you invoke the 3-minute rule, please? Can you put the timer on? Thank you. We're going to try to do 3 minutes if we're going to have this many people talk, so please make your point and exit. Thank you.
Yep, mine will be quick.
Okay.
I'm Holden Harwood. I just want to make a few points because I know some people have brought up in the location of it with other neighbors around. And, well, if you look at where Shields is or Fleet Farm, they all have high-density residential housing right across the street. If you're in a small, single-family development, you have less neighbors to worry about. There are approximately 75% of North Dakota FFLs are home-based FFLs. Your home-based FFLs will have far less inventory, if any inventory, sitting at their residence. And as the city already allows gunsmithing in a residence as a home-based business, you still have the same amount of firearms coming and going out of that residence also. And I do have a list, I'm not gonna read them all off because that'll take too much time, but approximately 100 Fargo residents that are in support of the change of this, including a couple of them as my neighbors.
Could you give it to Shelley at the end?
Yes,
please?
I can gladly do that. And that should be everything I got for my points. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you.
I'll try and make this brief. I'm John Wilson. For those of you who don't know me, Mr. Strand does quite well. He's also quite aware of my personal collection as a firearms owner. I'm a range safety officer at the Triple RMC in West Fargo. I'm a Class 1 concealed weapons license holder. I'm also a commercial driver with a hazardous materials permit. I can manufacture my own ammunition in any quantity that I so desire for my own personal use, but not for sale to the public, and that is an ATF regulation. I can manufacture the guns that I'm assuming you all saw in the email that I sent about a little over a week ago, which was at heightened times in our city. All of those guns can be assembled by me in kit form and legally transferred, or as a private citizen, I can sell them to anyone at any time under any conditions. I myself would prefer a legal transfer. I myself would prefer to get an FFL in order to conduct those same legal transfers in the city of Fargo. But the way the ordinance is now, I am denied that. So when we do our gun show in West Fargo, I sell guns as a private citizen with no background check because I am not required to by the ATF. It's as simple as that, gentlemen. Like I said, now I'll try not to keep going with this, but like I said in my email, to me, I view this issue as we either side with the police chief on this for the safe and legal transfers of firearms to keep them out of criminal hands, or we just take a devil-may-care attitude and let the chips fall where they may. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but that's the way I view things in life. I'm kind of a black and white person. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Dawn Morgan. Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. I would just like to speak in opposition of this zoning change. I've been working with the neighborhoods and for many years, even before we started the focus on the core neighborhoods. But one of the important matters is safety and health and a sense of well-being of living in your neighborhood. For me, having a firearms dealer next door to me, I've lived in my house for 40 years, but I'd consider moving because I don't want to live next to anyone carrying guns in and out of a house. There have been, according to the statistic, 100 people in favor of this change. I'd just like to say if you put it to a citywide vote, I'd bet that 100 would disappear in a decimal point because people don't want guns around them. I noticed as I walked up to the door to City Hall, it says no firearms permitted. That means there's something wrong with firearms. There's also a prohibition of no firearms being sold within 1,000 feet of a school. So if that's the case, and we're talking about schools and teachers and parents going there, aren't they the same people that live in our neighborhoods? If they're being protected from guns, why isn't everybody else? So all I'm saying is that there is no need for this kind of a business in a neighborhood. What we need to do is focus more on health, well-being, and upstanding morals, good work ethic, and leave the guns to an industrial area. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mayor, I will make this brief. My name is Randy Harwood. I just wanted to say, to me, this really isn't a pro-gun, anti-gun issue like it's been brought up by almost everybody. To me, this is a fair commerce issue. We already have 7 FFL dealers that are home-based in this city. I would hazard to guess that nobody even knows where they are. Their neighborhoods are oblivious to that fact. I would also say that there are probably individuals that have more firearms in their possession that aren't FFL dealers that nobody knows about also. Also the notion of it being a safety issue, I don't know how much more safe you can get when the ATF and the Fargo Police Department both say that there are no safety issues. In all the decades that there have been FFL home-based businesses in Fargo, there have been no instances of police calls or issues of safety brought up at all. There's not a stream of cars or customers that are making these neighborhoods unsafe. There's probably more cars and more activity at a Tupperware party or a Pampered Chef party or a wine tasting party in the neighborhood than at some of these home-based FFLs. And also, I guess, I would support the change because it's an equitable commerce issue. You have grandfathered in already half a dozen of these businesses, and to say we don't want any more, but they're already here. So I would say that would urge the commissioners to, from a commerce point of view, to make this change. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Adam Matson. Guns coming and leaving a house, be it an FFL or just a normal house, it's no different than a hunting party going out for a weekend, or me meeting up with my friends to go out to the range. Or 2 weeks ago, I took my 12-year-old daughter out to Castellan to go shooting. Guns are gonna come and go out of houses. It's just inevitable. Be it coming from a background check or coming from a purchase without a background check. It's gonna make no difference because this is a constitutional carry state. They're gonna be there regardless. So, thank you.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion? Oh. Tim?
Tim Flacco, 1350 2nd Street North, and I apologize. I'm very inappropriately dressed, but I was literally watering my flowers, watching this on my smartphone when my battery was dying and they were starting to talk about 1998. I served on the commission up and through 1998, and for the years and during that time when we were putting together the land development code. So that's why I'm here. I'm not speaking necessarily for or against anything, but just to kind of provide context. And it was an important meeting. I mean, we had a lot of long meetings, but I can literally remember where I sat, second from the corner. So, it was one of those issues in amongst a lot of other different challenging issues. But there was little discussion on it, but what was discussed was more about gunpowder and the quantities of that would be stored in houses. Not the ability to sell guns or anything out of one's home. And that's the crux. We weren't talking about dealers and what's appropriate. I mean, we spent more time talking about people with cars in their front yard that the grass had grown up and around. But largely, just so you know, that the focus at that time would have been not about the sales, but about keeping things, in their basement or something, no different than if somebody stores gas cans with gasoline in their basement, and what that might, mean to the fire department or to others. So I just wanted to share that perspective with you folks. And again, I apologize to the commission. I apologize to the scouts that are here for being very inappropriately dressed, but I came as quick as I could. I live, you know, a few blocks away, and
That's what open dialogue is. Thank you, Tim. Now I'll close public hearings. Do I have a motion, please?
Mayor, I'd like to split the question into two parts. Like Tim just said, there's a section about gun sales and transfers, and there's this idea of loading and selling ammunition, which I think is a separate issue altogether. So I'd like to make the first motion, let's see, to remove the restriction from the LEC for transfer and purchase of firearms from homes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor, and Commissioner Gehrig. My comments probably refer to both ends of this topic you want to discuss. And I have lots of questions, but my first and foremost observation is this is a community value where we need to sort out. Where does our community stand with what they want in their neighborhoods? And I believe that's a fair goal to aspire to, is to ascertain what do the people want, because we serve the people. A question I have that isn't answered yet, and I don't know that it can be answered today, but I think this is essential information before I'm able to vote on this, is we're right now in the process of, we have a consultant firm that's been engaged, that is working with neighborhood folks and leaders in a steering committee from across the community. And I know that there was an email sent out to, I believe, Mr. Lombardi with this consultant firm, and I'm looking for the answer to that. What have those consultants learned and experienced with other cities with this question? And then my second aspect of it is, what can we do to take this topic to our community leaders who are at the table, to ask them to vet this issue thoroughly and come back with a recommendation that reflects the neighborhood leaders as we're developing a long-term strategic plan. I can't, in my opinion, this is putting the cart before the horse to address this one little topic in a broader neighborhood approach that we've embarked upon. What do our neighborhoods, what is our plan? So if Aaron or Nicole could,
If I may,
answer that question.
if I may take a crack at that.
Commissioner Grinberg.
Commissioner Strand?
Certainly.
The first question, I believe, was raised by Don Morgan on the Planning Commission to Peter Lombardi, and that response back was they had no experience, had no opinion on it. The second question, the Land Development Code revision process is separate from the core neighborhood plan, and Nicole can certainly take a deeper dive on that, but this was part of a transition process, as Aaron reported. So I get what you're saying, but in my opinion, they're mutually exclusive in their approach.
If I could follow the question, I think. So I think one of the things that's maybe to step back to, and for the public and for you, what might be confusing about our recommendation in support of this is under land development code and zoning law, I see this as a different discussion than the Second Amendment discussion. And the zoning law nationwide is pretty silent to this issue. Talking about guns in a zoning ordinance is no different than talking about beer or adult entertainment. And I know we talk about adult entertainment, but best practice in zoning is not to talk about the specific use, because that's protected under our Constitution as well. And so when we talk about retail is allowed in home occupation, we should be talking about that issue and not about guns in particular. There's gonna be a lot of people from the public that disagree with me, but under zoning law, that's what's generally practiced. And so when you look nationwide, I did some searching broadly. So basically, going back to your discussion on the consultants, we went to 3 different consultants, and all 3 declined to provide research on this for us and declined to provide input on this for us. Because again, zoning and gun discussion, it's like talking about other moral issues in our community, doesn't belong in land use code. And so we should be talking about the performance standards in home occupation and what we're and what we think is appropriate or not appropriate.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you. And so Nicole, wouldn't it be okay if the appetite were there for this commission to send to those leaders of the neighborhoods and the consultants? I'd like to now have a discussion of every single one of these restrictions, not just this one that's on the table. You know, whether they want to have vehicles and repairs, if you want somebody fixing automobiles in your front yard and changing oil and changing tires and repairing cars. If you have somebody have a dispatch center, I don't quite get that one. Mortuaries in the neighborhood, interesting. Animal care, grooming, and boarding facilities, I could just see lots of folks going, let's open that topic up. You know, I like pets, you know, and then adult entertainment centers. So why don't we look at all of these topics in the space we've created to listen to our neighbors and our leaders about what they want in their community? That's my concern. Is I'd like to have an input about every single one of these restrictions and vet them all.
And I concur. And so this is probably not the place for dialogue, but I would concur that, going back to Commissioner Grinberg's point, is part of our master plan and a strategic plan for our department is the core neighborhood plan and the land development code rewrite. We're in the analysis phase right now, diagnostic of our land development code. That's probably due out around August or so. Our core neighborhood plan is due back in December or so. And then the next phase of evolution of those codes and process and communication. What we have in front of us is actually an application. And so there is another constitutional right, due process. When someone makes an application like Mr. McDonald to the planning department, we have a requirement by law to process that application. So yes, maybe this is a good time for me. One of my concluding comments for Aaron's review is you have three or four options in front of you tonight, not just our recommendation, of course. And so it's obviously to split them apart as you talk about ammunition or guns, and also to table this until further discussion, continuation, or to deny it. And so there's many options. And also from a staff's perspective, just in case there's any confusion, by all means, you have the hard decision to contradict our recommendation. And so I'll just put that difficult discussion back to you.
Further discussion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just, for me, it's quite simple. We've received a lot of feedback on this, and my sense is that this isn't going to go away no matter what the vote comes out with tonight. It'll end up either in the Attorney General's office or in the North Dakota Legislature. But as I look at the facts and the data and the information been shared by those in the industry, the facts and the data suggest to me that the FFL license works fine in West Fargo, Grand Forks, and Bismarck, and in Moorhead. Then we maybe went too far 20-some years ago with the FFL license. I won't support the manufacturing of ammunition, which is the genesis, what got us here with that ordinance. They're two different issues. There's a volatile explosion potentially, and all the things that come with ammunition versus, what we've heard in the Planning Commission, what we heard in some ways tonight, that if it's an issue of inheritance, I inherited my father's guns, had to license them, transfer them. It's a convenience thing. And largely a lot of the business these FL license holders do is that kind of service. And so when you look at no concerns from the police department, no concerns from ATF, the data is sound, they're two different issues, and I don't have a problem with the FFL change. And so I just show those, share those as my views. And we want legal transfer. No one would disagree with that. And this is Commissioner Strand, in your eloquent way about community values, I believe there's a lot of people who would believe this is a community value as well, the right to bear arms. If you want to make it into Second Amendment issue, many people have that definition, but as a value, I think the gentleman said that, go hunting, or your friends go over and pick you up, you transfer it in gun cases back and forth, the license, the laws. So I really don't see that it's going to change core neighborhoods by allowing FFL 7 people to continue a business. So that'd be my take on the FFL transfer.
Commissioner Gary.
A lot has been said, so I'll be brief as well. Some people don't like guns, and that's your right, and that's okay. However, not liking something doesn't mean we should make it illegal, right? The issues that have been brought up that are opposed to this are either well-intended but misguided perceptions, or they're simply opinions, and they're not backed up by facts. So, again, I haven't heard one good fact to say that this is a bad thing because. An example of one of those things would be a home-based FFL is more dangerous than a storefront, than Shields or Fleet Farm or something like that. And not only is that not true, the ATF is saying it's the exact opposite. Another reason would be home-based FFLs don't follow the same rules. They have different rules, different background checks, different things that they do that get around all these things that we put in place to protect people. And that simply isn't true as well. They follow the exact same regulations and the same background checks. Some people just say, I don't want more guns in the street, more guns in the street. Having a handful of FFLs in the city of Fargo, additional to what is already out there, is not gonna put more guns in the street. I can go right now and purchase a gun from all these businesses. What I have done in the past is I went to Moorhead and I got a .22 rifle that I ordered online. I got transferred for very cheap versus going to a pawn shop or to a bigger business. It was just a convenience thing for me. An argument would be, well, ammunition blows up and it's very dangerous. Well, the reality is that hasn't happened, one. Two, very few people are gonna manufacture ammunition for sale because it's not very economical. And three, which was already brought up before, I can stockpile ammo to the hilt if I wanted to, and no one had any say about it, whether I was buying it from a retailer like Fleet Farm or Shields, or if I do it myself in my basement. There's no regulation saying I can't. So it's already being done. You know, suggesting there's gonna be dozens of people going in and out of homes in a neighborhood, and that makes you scared or that makes you uneasy. Well, first of all, there are gonna be background checks. There's gonna be the same regulations. There's not gonna be that volume of people. And as was already stated, there are pawn shops and there are places that you can buy firearms that are really yards away from where people sleep every day. And just because I live in a home, a single family home, doesn't make my safety any more important than theirs. So if that's your concern, then we better shut down all gun stores. The vast majority of FFLs in North Dakota are home-based. The ATF agents I've spoken to, numerous of them, and Chief Todd have said they have had no problems with it. There's been no explosions. There's been no robberies, any more or less than the storefronts. And again, it's more safe usually. So they go through the same background checks, the same permitting, the same restrictions, and there's simply no good reason that we can point to that says, statistically or otherwise, that this is a bad idea. It's how people feel about firearms in general. And again, you have that right to dislike guns, but it shouldn't make it illegal to own them or transfer them.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question of our legal counsel and then perhaps a motion after that. Eric Johnson, is this position legally defensible that the city is in now? Or do you have concerns about legally defending the current status or the potential changes in status?
Yeah, no, I think it is defendable. I mean, I don't think there's a legal hook either way on this issue. It is just a values issue. So to sort of take your question and convert it, I don't think there's a Second Amendment type issue related to this. This isn't about the Second Amendment and whatever rights it provides to individuals. Similarly, there's a state statute that creates a kind of a preemption statute. It precludes cities from regulating the sale and transfer of firearms. Kind of sounds like something that should be prohibited by cities, but what it doesn't really go toward is to prohibit local regulations, local zoning regulations from determining the locations where firearm sales can occur. And that hasn't been acted upon in North Dakota courts or anything, but other states with sort of similar situations have had court decisions that support city zoning regulations that aren't impacted by the kind of preemptive statute that North Dakota has. So am I concerned? I mean, is it possible that my take could be wrong? Certainly. Court might rule differently, or the Attorney General might have a different opinion about that. We did ask a consultant that helps us regularly on constitutional issues and asked that law firm to take a look at it because we thought it would be helpful, and they basically were in alignment with what I just told you. So that was helpful information. Again, not helpful to flip the switch either way, really, but helpful to understand the background. So does that help?
Yes.
Shelley, would you just read the motion so I'm clear?
Him to. I'd ask Gary to.
Yeah, the motion is to remove the portion, and obviously that restricts the transfer of sales from your home. We're not touching the ammunition part at this point. We don't want two separate motions.
So when you were speaking, Eric, you were speaking to his motion or to the original motion that was brought up by the planning department?
I was sort of speaking to the overall current ordinance that we have, but I can amend, I can sort of supplement my answer.
Because a motion on the floor is what I'd like you to comment on, because I think Commissioner Strand has that question.
Right, and to supplement my answer, the separate motion by Commissioner Garrick is also just fine in terms of the Second Amendment, in terms of the state preemption statute. I think you can amend the city ordinance to remove the restriction, the automatic restriction of firearm sales, but leave in place the restriction on the ammunition, which is what I think Commissioner Garrick's proposed motion was.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I understand it, we have a primary motion that's been advanced that Commissioner Garrick has amended. I'm going to advance a motion of a higher precedence. I move that we table this discussion until it has been properly vetted by the committee that's doing our strategic neighborhood plan at this moment, developing those new policies. And my motion includes that they study all restricted uses of commercial uses in your homes, including all of the other topics of vehicles and large equipment repair, dispatch centers, mortuaries, animal care, grooming and boarding facilities, adult entertainment centers, and firearms and ammunition uses in production. So I move that we table this until that committee has come back to us with citizen-directed recommendations regarding all of these uses in neighborhoods.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Pepcorn.
Just a couple quick comments, and one of them is a question for Eric. So no matter what we vote on, we're not going to inhibit individuals' ability to buy or sell guns out of their homes. Wouldn't you say that's a pretty good summary? I mean, that's guaranteed. We have the right to do that. If we have a gun, we can sell it to someone else. Isn't that correct? Or at least that's what I thought. Because I think that's the thing that we should. That's none of our business. If I have a gun and I wanted to sell it to somebody else, that's the city has no involvement in that. So I'm interested in answering that question. Maybe someone else can answer it, but do you get what I'm asking?
I think I do. The question is just on, if it's not the question is it a home occupation if a gun owner just wants to sell his or her gun to somebody else? I don't know what the federal regulations are for that, but I would suggest that that's probably not an occupation necessarily. The occupation, I would assume, and Nicole might have some insight on it. To be honest, it never occurred to me that narrow of a question, but I just would think that's not an enterprise where you're having inventory and buying things and turning around and selling.
Commissioner Pepcorn wanted to sell his gun to me. Could I do that?
I think you could.
So we've
Mr. Garrett.
The question though is the legal transfer. So like the scenario is I buy my son a .22 rifle. You're an FFL dealer. I need to send that weapon to an FFL dealer so that I can go get a background check, pay the $25, pay the $50 to get it transferred to me legally. I can't have that gun shipped to my house. Now, if you aren't an FFL, you can't play that role. You can sell him a gun, person to person, but you don't have that gun. I picked up the gun I want online, I sent it to you, and I paid you the $25 to go pick it up, is basically what that is. So, I mean, in general, no, you're not stopping people from selling guns, but you are stopping that kind of commerce if you don't have home-based FFL.
But he doesn't get to do a background check on me, so if he sells me the gun, I take it, nobody knows what I've done, right?
And the way that we're proposing it now is you would do a background check on it. That's what the whole FFL thing is we're trying to make it safer, trying to make it more uniform.
Any other discussion? There's a second, or there's the amendment on the floor right now to table this until the neighborhoods get to go through it. Commissioner Garrick.
I'm just a little bit confused how that motion is better than my motion. Why do we vote on that one first?
It's a higher precedence as far as parliamentary procedure goes. Tabling is a higher precedence than amendments or the main motion. If you look at the order of precedence of...
Wouldn't you have to table my motion though and not...
No.
A table motion does that, Tony. It allows the discussion to move further down.
But I believe he has to table my
But we'd
motion.
have to vote on that, and then we don't vote on your motion.
Eric?
Yeah, the motion to table, I believe, is actually a non-debatable motion, I believe, and does have higher precedent. Sometimes seems unfair, I realize, but I think that is the case.
I got outmaneuvered then.
Roll call vote?
Yes.
Horn?
Aye.
Gary?
No.
Grinberg?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. Next motion.
All right, I move to push this question to the AG. As a commission, we can ask the Attorney General to tell us if this law is legal in the first place. It appears to me that it's not. The state law says you can't make any laws more restricted than the state. Clearly, there are home-based FFLs all over the state, and we are saying that you can't do that. So I believe it's more restricted than the state, and I'd just like to have an opinion by the AG.
Second.
Discussion. So we're gonna get an opinion from the AG's office. Okay? Any other discussion? That's a simple one. Roll call vote.
Gary?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. Third motion.
I think that actually covers it for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're both covered.
I told you another one, but that he tabled my other motions.
Well, you kind of got a decision, but you didn't get a decision, so we'll see what comes of this, but thanks for the good discussion. We move on to item C, amendments to the 2019 Action Plan Home Investment Partnership Program. In fact, why don't we do this? Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll get to that, okay? meeting back to order. So give me my mic. We'll call the meeting back to order. Per discussion, Eric Johnson, we finished our discussion. It's the commission's direction for you to draft a letter to the AG's office. That's what came out of that motion. Is that clear then?
That's the way I'll take it, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're next going to go to C, amendments to the 2019 Action Plan Home Investment Partnership Program. Tia to explain.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm Tia Broseth from the Planning Department. I am the Coordinator for Community Development. So I will be covering both C and D under the public hearing agenda item number 37. Both public hearings are proposed amendments to some of our previously approved HUD program activities, as well as adding a brand new one. So starting with item C, amendments to the 2019 action plan, specifically related to our home funds. This proposed amendment cancels an activity that has been delayed and will be considered for future funding. That activity is the Golden Ridge Affordable Senior Housing Project by Craig Properties. In place of this activity, we are proposing the inclusion of another affordable senior housing project, Elliott Place, by the Fargo Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We are also revising previous language that we used, which essentially stated that if we had any canceled activities, those funds would go to Beyond Shelter Incorporation's Homefield 3. But in place of that, we're suggesting that they actually go to Elliott Place instead. So in addition to this being a public hearing, we're also asking for action this evening after receiving any public comment. As a result of COVID-19, HUD has extended momentarily, allowing for shortened public comment periods on the 2019 action plans, which is the plan that's being affected by this proposed amendment. So instead of the typical 30-day public comment period, we're allowed to do a 5-day one, and today is day 5 of the public comment period that this particular change falls under. The required public notices are in your packet, so it has been made, the public comment period has been made known to everybody. If there are any questions at this time, or if there are none, we could just go into opening the public comment period. I mean, the public
Is
hearing.
anyone present who wishes to speak to this action plan? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak? I'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry you couldn't get the Golden Ridge to go, but hopefully next year that might be able to happen.
Yep, it sounds like we could be on track for a 2021 project.
Any other questions, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Strand?
Yes.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. Amendments to the 2018 Action Plan Community Development Block Grant to you as well.
Yep, so for the next item, this is a simple budget amendment to the 2018 action plan specifically related to our community development block grant funds. So what this proposed amendment is increasing the funding for rehabilitation work at the city's emergency homeless shelter, Gladys Ray Shelter. This budget increase of $100,000 would allow for us to complete most of the work that is very much needed at the shelter, including security features, plumbing, electrical, flooring, some new finishes wherever they're needed. So funds would be taken from 2 other activities that are no longer moving as quickly as they have, but have already had some major project accomplishments, and that's outlined within the public notice packet that you have. And because this is the 2018 action plan, this is the full 30-day public comment period, and there's no action required this evening on this. It's just opening a public comment, a public hearing, and the public comment period ends July 2nd for this particular activity, and again, the required notice has gone out, and the next time we'll be here, I believe, is July 13th for final approval on this. So that's when we will be seeking action, which would likely be on consent as usual. So if there are no questions with this particular item, I suggest the public hearing just be opened.
So anyone present who wishes to speak to this change? Is anyone wishing to speak? I'll close the public hearing. Commissioner Gehrig.
A quick question. It says a budget increase, but you're not increasing the overall budget. You're just taking money from one project and putting it into another.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. It's the activity budget increase for that particular Gladys Ray Shelter rehab project.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? We have no action on that. Thank you. Next is item F, application filed by Great Plains Kaiser South Holdings for payment in lieu of tax application pilot for project located at 617, 621 First Avenue North. With the application, will use an operation of leasing residential apartments and commercial space. Jim Gilmore to explain.
Yes, this is an application or a project that you've actually previously approved. It's just a change in the investment group. The project is the same, the incentives would be the same. This has already been reviewed by our public financial group. They found that it was previously met that but-for test. What was approved previously was this Kessler project. There's two parts to it, the segment to the north and the segment to the south. It's one building. When the incentives were improved, there was a 5-year Renaissance zone incentive on both the north and the south, but the pilot was only on the south. The reason for that was when we sold the property to the north, the developer agreed to limit their request for incentives to a 5-year Renaissance zone on the north. The overall project, it'll actually be one building. It'll extend from 2nd Avenue North to 1st Avenue North. It'll be a mixed-use development. It's kind of phase 4 of this overall Roberts redevelopment. First phase being that parking ramp, second the wrap that went around the Roberts, third Dillard, and now this is the final piece to this overall redevelopment plan. This will include 109 housing units, 70 indoor parking spaces, and 9,000 square feet of commercial space that'll front 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue North. So you have the recommended motion. Again, this is a transfer of an already approved pilot incentive from DFI to the Great Plains Holdings. Both of these investment groups are managed by Kilbourne. One is an opportunity fund, and so they're really switching which investment group is funding this particular project. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here to answer any questions also.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this? Anyone present who wishes to speak? Any comments? When are you going to start building? My question.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Zimney with Kilbourne Group. Jim did a good job kind of explaining, kind of to summarize, the Downtown Real Estate Fund was Kilbourne Group's first real estate investment fund. As these real estate investment funds are intended, they come, an end of life in terms of the investment. So now this is being transferred to the Great Plains Opportunity Zone Fund. The project is set to start right after July 4th, so mid-July.
Thank you. Any other public comment? If not, I'll close public comment time. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, I'm just curious. I believe this would have passed 3-2 with our commission when it originally came through. Do you know, is that accurate?
I don't recall if you had voted for it or against it.
Okay, I'm going to guess. And I'm not opposed to these projects and to these developments in downtown. I'm just going to be consistent that when there are market rate apartments being developed, my hopes are that we can do like almost 600 other cities do and require some sort of affordable apartment component with these incentives. So I'm going to stay consistent with my original vote.
Although this is just a change of ownership, it doesn't go against the pilot.
That's okay, I understand.
Yep.
I think maybe I understand your concern about affordable housing, Commissioner Strand. One thing I do want to point out is that when we were working on that Nestor incentive, part of that redevelopment was the city was agreeing to sell some property to them, and Kilbourne then sold property up on 4th Avenue North that's now facilitating low-income housing projects. So sometimes these projects work together even though you don't see them on the same agenda item. I think Kilbourne's worked with us to get that low-income housing project going, even though it's not directly tied to this motion.
And that's a great project also. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Jim, how
Roll
did I
call
vote? How did I vote, Jim?
Gary?
I'm just kidding.
Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg? Strand? Gehrig?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. I gotta have, first Commissioner Strand gets to speak 2 items.
Well, mine's a real simple one. This is the highest, these are those high priorities again. Happy birthday to Eric Johnson on June 13th. It's an easy one for me to remember. That was my father's birthday. So you wonder how I remember some of these. But Mayor Mahoney, when your birthday rolls around the 28th, I'll just remember that as your birthday. So I hope we all remember you on your birthday as well and wish you the best for your leadership.
Thank you. Commissioner Grinberg gets to have the last word. He wanted to make sure he got to say that last word. So he's going to start it with a presentation, and then he's going to come back to the podium.
Well, thank you, Mayor Mahoney, Commissioner Strand, Commissioner Gehrig, Commissioner Pepcorn. I'm going to say a few more things when I sit down. But first, I'd like to reflect a little bit. I think just about everybody in this room, and even those that are watching, would agree with me that we are certainly in uncertain times. And for somebody who's been blessed with opportunities to serve with the likes of Senator Flacco, if you didn't know his name, just look at his baseball shirt, years in the legislature, many in civic involvement, boards, serving in the legislature. When we went into this tragedy and learning the impact of George Floyd's death, and the ramifications of that nationwide in our community, it really was, I think, a pause for all of us to stop and listen and try and understand what's going on. That on top of a pandemic and the anxiety that many of us feel. And so particularly that night when the riots were happening and our fine law enforcement were working collaboratively with our cities of Moorhead, West Fargo, Cass County, protecting our city, allowing for protests to be legal, and then when it crossed the line, it was all very puzzling to me for somebody who's been involved for so long, and quite frankly, alarming. I got up at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning, drove into this room for the press conference Sunday morning, and listened to the leadership of the mayors and how we were working through this tragedy. It is a tragedy what happened to George Floyd, but how as a community we're going to deal with this, and trying to understand. And I went home, and Barry's going to like this comment. Often the form gets it right, and often they don't. But in this case, they did, and I was truly moved by Patrick Williams and his son Adonis. And if you read that article, and I'm going to present this to Patrick and Adonis here in a moment, it really summed up for me who we are as a community, what we've been through. And I'm going to take 2 of Patrick's quotes and share those that you didn't have a chance to read this article. Patrick brought his son down to help clean up. That's the nature of this article. Unity gets more done than division. And I think the 2 most powerful quotes by Patrick after he was football scholarship. We have one thing in common, just met tonight. We're both Dragons. And when he finished Moorhead State, Minnesota State University, Moorhead, his quote was, "This just seemed like a nice place to settle, a nice place to build a family," he said. Now think about what we've all listened, what we've all been through in our community. And Adonis, your dad said, "I wanted to show him what can happen if you let emotions take control of you and you don't use logic." There's still a mess to be cleaned up, Patrick said, so let's get with it, Patrick and Adonis. So with that, probably one of the most moving articles I've ever read in the Fargo Forum as a result of what we were being challenged by, and I wanted to present this at my expense to Adonis. didn't know by now, he's one of our finest Fargo firefighters. Patrick?
You want to say something? I just thank you guys. I guess when this all happened, I had no idea that it would it would come to go this far. I was just trying to teach my son a lesson. I thought it'd be a good life lesson that he could take with him throughout his life, and maybe something that he can lean on. Me and my wife Amanda here, we do our best to try to make sure that our children are productive members of society, and that they know, what pitfalls you can fall into. So that's just kind of what I had. I just thank you guys for the plaque and the article. I know for myself, I'll remember this for the rest of my life, and I'm hoping that he will too. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service as well.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, it's been a run. Tried to think of what I should say, but I thought it would sum it up to appreciation to meet so many fine local leaders with our team that leads the city of Fargo, working together on the commission, more often agreeing than disagreeing. I would probably, if I tracked everything, we were pretty consistent, but we did have our differences. And so I really appreciate that. The average citizen doesn't get a chance to see how the city operates. The average citizen doesn't see the passion and the dedication to, whether it's Brendan Engineering, Ben Dow, I nicknamed Ben Dow Cosmo if he's watching, Bruce Grubb, who is able to hold all the pieces together day in and day out, Nicole, couldn't be more proud of her leadership. When I heard and learned about the planning portfolio and Jim's longevity of the desire to move Jim into a more strategic role with the city and have Nicole take the reins in planning. I mean, the people of Fargo don't really understand and see that because they don't have it, they don't live it every day, like you do. And so I just want to convey my gratitude, and the citizens of Fargo get one heck of a bang for their buck for their tax dollars that we make decisions here on property taxes. The average homeowner spends $50 to $70 a month, $600-700 a year in property tax. They get a lot of value, and that's a testament to the leadership. It's a testament to you as dedicated public servants and working for the city. I wish John and Arlette well as we move forward. You move forward, as well as Commissioner Gehrig and Pepcorn and Mayor Mahoney. And like I shared, Patrick and I are dragons. And I remember Evelyn Larson, one of my professors, a young kid about 23, I think it was at the time, said, you can get a college degree and start a career, but you need to make a commitment to your community and stay involved in your community, make a difference. And those words have rung through 35 plus years later. And so I look forward to the future, the Fargo's future, and you can count on me being part of that. So again, thank you for indulging my closing remarks.
Tony, thank you very much. Move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We wanted to give you that one last time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your years of service. Appreciate it.